Thank you. Good to see you all here tonight. Thank you so much for coming out. I am going to speak just briefly, but one of the things the Culture Impact team asked me to share some thoughts. So I'm a pastor, and I like to ask questions. So I'm senior pastor here at Church for All Nations. This is our 34th year, coming up on 35th as the senior pastor. But I also oversee and direct the Charis Bible College, third year Charis Bible College Practical Government School. And I like to ask this question every year. How many of you somewhere in your journey heard from a pastor or a spiritual leader, Christians had no business in politics? Things like that. And it's usually the same everywhere. And so part of my journey started back in 2008. I won't go into all the details of it, but the Lord started me on a particular journey, and I started studying our history and learned about this thing called the Johnson Amendment. And it was introduced by LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, powerful Texas senator, that was being challenged for being soft on communism. And they slipped this thing called the Johnson Amendment down on the House floor. It had no review. It was passed without really knowing what it was. And it was never targeted for the church. And in July of 1954, a noose went around the pulpit and began to slowly be tightened. And then all of a sudden, we started seeing the acceleration, separation of church and state, and pastors have no business speaking. But what they didn't know, that overturned over 150 some odd years of history of our nation, because we used to have pre-election sermons. And the pastors used to be the most informed people in the whole community. If you wanted to know what was going on, what a candidate was like, or what it was all about, if you want to know what the Bible said, if there was earthquakes, they would preach what the Scripture says about earthquakes. And today we've seen a complete reversal, and in many cases, and just know this, I love pastors dearly. I am a pastor, and I love them, and I understand that world a little bit. But today, pastors are the least informed. And so I believe as the church goes, so goes the nation. But as the pastor goes, so goes the church. So actually what I'm going to do, I could go several different directions, but I want to do a little lightning round of just some things, because most people don't know our origins, our history, where we came from. And I will say this, I'll do this again. How many of you have not heard, and this is probably not going to work, how many of you have not or do not know what the Black Robe Regiment is? This is the best I've ever had. Only one or two hands go up. So I'd never heard the term until I read a 3-page article by David Barton several years ago with 101 footnotes. And I discovered, I thought, well, I wonder what a Black Robe Regiment, maybe that's judges. Judges wear black robes. Well, it was a backhanded comment by the British against the clergy of the day. And basically what they said, if it hadn't been for that Black Robe Regiment, i.e. the clergy, the pastors, we'd have won this war. Secular historians later on discovered that if pastors had not led, had not spoken out, there never would have been a revolution. They also said if somehow the revolution had broken out, it would not have been sustainable without the pastors leading the way. Every right set forth in the Declaration of Independence, it's proven to have come from American pulpits prior to 1763. And what's our birthday? 1776. So the Constitution and the Declaration are really, it's been called children of the pulpit. Let me just give you a lightning round of some slides, and I just asked my staff, they've got over 1,000 slides they've made for me, but look at some of these things. This is the preamble to our Colorado state constitution. We, the people of Colorado, with profound reverence for the supreme ruler of the universe, in order to form a more independent and perfect government, establish justice. Wow. I wonder if any of our current leaders up the road here have read our state constitution. Next slide, I believe we're going to see our Colorado motto, nothing without providence, or nothing without the deity. If you look at all 50 state constitution preambles, get William Federer's book, Bill Federer, dear friend, called Secular Reasons, 3 Secular Reasons to be One Nation Under God. If you understand that book, you could be an atheist. And if you understand the principle, you want us under God because you don't want a nation not under God. So I'll just do a little lightning round of some slides that we've put together here. Benjamin Franklin, freedom is not a gift bestowed upon us by other men, but a right that belongs to us by the laws of God and nature. I actually have heard reporters say, God doesn't grant rights, government does. Next slide. Man will ultimately be governed by God or by tyrants. That is a fact. History has proven it. We ignore this to our peril, and it's all hidden in plain sight if we are willing to explore that. The great pillars of all government and social life are virtue, morality, and religion. This is the armor, and this alone that renders us invincible. Patrick Henry, 1799. Next slide. I put this in my book, Army of God Rising. The Lord gave that book to me in 2015. We got it published or printed in 2016. Then we had the conferences, Breaking the Silence. And I put this in the front, George Washington. It was a letter he wrote to John Armstrong in 1792. I am sure there never was a people who had more reason to acknowledge a divine interposition in their affairs than those of the United States. And I should be pained to believe that they have forgotten that agency, which was so often manifested during our revolution, or that they failed to consider the omnipotence of that God who is alone able to protect them. I think most of us agree. I believe we're at a point without the intervention of God, we're done. The leaven has gotten too far into the loaf, so to speak. And the leaven has spread, but our nation is a nation of miracle turnarounds. And we're seeing right now a great awakening. I have to tell you this. I was at an event with Family Research Council for their P50 pastors, and we went around. There's about 15 in this one. And they asked for a report or an update from the state of Colorado, and I shared some things going on. I said, I never thought I'd be saying this, but I am actually grateful for what happened with Corona. What the Lord showed us, 3 things were happening. There's sifting, refining, and separation going on. And we also discovered, and the Lord gave us some specific words here of things that He's doing, but the church is coming alive. And when you study history, and great revivals, reformation, and awakenings are happening, just remember this: they are very contentious, they are very divisive, they are very messy. There's a Proverbs principle that says if the stall is clean, there's nothing getting done. So how many of you know we're going to have to shovel some stuff? You know what we're talking about. Oxen exhaust. This is the historian. Constitutional Convention and the written Constitution were children of the pulpit. I think we've got another slide or two here. No, that was it. Okay. One thing I was going to read, I have a little, we sell these, they're $1 or $2, these little copies of the Constitution. I like this because of the quotes that are in the front. And I tell people if they don't have the money, just give them one if you promise to read it. Our Constitution. Ken Davis, a lot of you, I'm going to have him come up in just a moment. If you haven't taken his Constitution class, but he gets up and says, this Constitution is to the citizen of the United States what the Bible is to the Christian. And I'll guarantee you most people have not read it. One simple last statement. John Adams said our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. A lot of discussion shouldn't even be taking place because people have booted God out. But there is some good things going on. This is a time to lift up our heads because there are great things. I'm on a text thread of pastors, and this morning it was lighting up early because of some meetings that were going on around town here that people don't seem to know anything about. But anyway, it's so good to have these leaders that are going to come up here tonight. I believe we're getting back to our foundations in our nation. Pastors are rising up. There's a new Black Robe Regiment that's rising up, and they're going to begin to speak the word of the Lord, and we thank God for people like this that are willing to come and dialogue. Ken Davis is a great blessing to us here at Church for All Nations. He's the leader of our Culture Impact team. And would you give Ken Davis a warm welcome as he comes to lead us tonight?
Well, hello. Well, I guess I don't need to tell you my name, so I will shortly here introduce our panel. But we would be remiss as we are approaching a day where we can celebrate folks who have been heroes in this nation because you've served. And so as we approach Veterans Day, I'd love for everyone who is a veteran to please stand and be recognized. Amen. I will say this, you have preserved for me the greatest nation on the planet. And so I am eternally grateful to everyone who has served in our military here. And so we're going to just kind of go over the rules, if you will, what we're going to do here. Today's meeting is your meeting. And so we're going to do an open Q&A for much of this meeting. Everyone up here will be given 5 minutes to give opening statements. But outside of that, this is all about what you would like to hear from your elected. Ask a question, don't make a statement, and please be brief. Don't come up with, I'm telling you now, I won't be controlling that mic, but you are to ask a question. How many questions is a question? One. If you want to ask a second question or a third question, go to the back of the line, get back in line, right? But we're going to have plenty of time here for Q&A. For each of these folks here. I did want to ask, if you guys don't mind, we're going to ask that we solicit your prayers. Dave Williams, House District 15 State Rep, was supposed to be here and was unable to join us today because he's been sick. And so please keep him in prayer. And with that being said, we were able to get a pinch hitter, and we're pretty happy about our pinch hitter for Dave, and so I'm going to introduce her in a second here. But let's go down the line here. We've got Dave Donaldson, who is Colorado Springs City Council, District 1.
That's right.
Okay. Lojinos Gonzalez Jr. is one of our county commissioners. Our pinch hitter is from District 49, Director District 4, Ivy Lou. Mark Baisley is House District 39. I'll let him tell you where it's Teller and Douglas. Teller and Douglas. See, I'm good at this. All right. We've got a sheriff from up in Teller County, Jason Mikesell. He is the sheriff in Teller County. I'm not gonna lie, Carolyn's, her position is too long, so I'm gonna read it. But Carolyn Martin is Director of Government Relations, and she's also the head of Christian Home Educators of Colorado, or CHEC, is what I like to call it. And then last but not least is Stephanie Luck. She is House District 47 for Colorado, and that is Fremont, Otero, and Pueblo. All of Otero, parts of Pueblo, and parts of Fremont. And so that is our panel today. They represent much of our local government, which is what we wanted to have represented here. And so Ann here will be holding the microphone. And so I'm going to ask that, oh, that's right, we get opening statements. I said that, didn't I? So we have 5 minutes of opening statements. Each member up here has a mic next to them. And so watch the beautiful lady here in the red. She will be keeping your time. And Stephanie wanted to go last. Sorry, I had to throw her under the bus. No, I'm just kidding. She wanted to go last. So we're going to start here with Dave and just go down the line. It's on. It's on.
So, is it on? No, it's not. How do you turn
Here you go. Take that.
Sure, yeah.
So it's on. So I'm Dave Donaldson, as Ken said, City Councilman from District 1. City Council is probably the closest government body to the people here. When you have a pothole, there's speeding in your neighborhood, anything like that, contact your city councilman. There's 9 of us on City Council. We have 7 staff that help us out, 7 folks that work for City Council. One of them, his name is Alex Ryden, nice, smart guy, and he writes stuff for us sometimes, like for something like this. So I asked him to do that so I could give you a smart guy's presentation. Then you'll hear me on the questions and answers. And if I have time left over, I'll give you a little more. So thanks for inviting me to speak about your Colorado Springs City Council tonight. I'm the representative from District 1, right, which encompasses the northwest part of the city down to Fillmore and east to North Academy. There are 9 total city council members. 6 are broken down into the districts throughout the city, and 3 are at large. Council members, the at-large ones, they represent the whole city. The districts represent their specific part. City Council serves as the legislative branch of the city government. Mayor Suthers represents the executive branch. It is Council's responsibility to set legislative policies and approve ordinances and resolutions that govern city operations. Yesterday, we spent a whole bunch of time working on this puppy mill ordinance. Maybe some of you saw that on the front page of the Gazette today. That's one example. Currently, City Council and Finance are working through the annual budget process. Council is responsible for adopting the city budget with or without amendments and appropriating funds. We work together with the mayor's office to appropriate funds to the right places while balancing the needs of the citizens. See, Alex is pretty good, huh? You can just read this, pretty good. Another responsibility we have on council is to hear major land use issues or items, including quasi-judicial matters such as rezoning applications, and appeals from the Planning Commission. For example, we recently worked on the Kettle Creek North subdivision, which is not too far north of here. We also oversee annexations and land acquisitions like the recent Tops purchase of Fisher Canyon near Fort Carson. Another example, this is me now, another example of the land stuff is 2424 Garden of the Gods. Maybe some of you heard of that. That was very important to the citizens that live over in Mountain Shadows. That's my my part of the city, and I think I and we did a good job of representing the citizens on that, although I can't discuss it because there's now legal action against us. So City Council also serves as the board of directors for Colorado Springs Utilities. We appoint the utilities CEO, who may not be very popular at the moment, and we serve as a regulatory authority for utilities by setting the rates for electric, gas, water, and wastewater services. So I'm going to fire Alex for putting that in there about us setting the rates, because, yep, I see some fingers pointed down, and we can talk about that during the question and answer portion. The City Council works in a historic city hall, more than 100 years old, which we refer to as the People's House. We truly are your representatives in your neighborhoods. Thank you again for inviting me to join you tonight. And how many minutes do I have left? 2? Okay, then a little about me is I know it did seem like a long time. I was elected back in April from District 1. I remember being up here on the stage. Ken was asking the questions. Fortunately, one of my opponents chose to wear a mask the entire night. I don't think that helped him. I spent 21 years in the Army. I came to Colorado Springs 30 years ago with my wife. First assignment in the Army. Our daughter was 2 weeks old. We drove out here from Massachusetts. We fell in love with Colorado Springs and decided, hey, I'd try to get back here and stay here as much as we could. We raised our family in District 1. Our kids went to school here in town. They're both here in the state still. When I was in the Army, I was a Green Beret for part of that time, which is, the SF. I was out there in 10th Group. That was about 4 or 5 years of my career. I was in military intelligence before that. After that, I became a physician assistant. I went to that program. It's an inter-service. They even take Air Force guys like Longinos in there. And then I became an officer with that, deployed to Iraq for 3 different years. So I spent 3 full years in Iraq treating Americans. I served as a flight doc in aviation helicopters, served under H.R. McMaster, served under he was Colonel Perna back then. He was a 4-star general working for President Trump at the end. It's a real honor to be on City Council. I do my best to represent all of you. Some of you may have seen some of that today. We deal with issues that really do impact you. I mean, the last 48 hours are kind of a blur right now because there was the Board of Health thing. That's important. 1 city council member is appointed to the Board of Health. 2 county commissioners are appointed to the Board of Health. Then there are 6 others. So does it matter who your city councilman, who your county commissioners are? You tell me after today, right? Time's up.
Thank you, Dave. Longinos Gonzalez, again, I represent District 4, which is the southeast portion of the county, which includes the southeast part of the Springs, and also includes Fountain Security, Whitefield, Ellicott, Rush Yoder, Hanover. So the rural, I've got a mix of a large area of rural and then the southern urban areas, as well as having Fort Carson, Peterson, and Schriever Space Force bases. I always got to remember it's Space Force bases now. So I first moved here, had gone to the Air Force Academy, loved the area, graduated in the 20 years in the Air Force. Always tried to get assigned here. I never could. Everybody else wanted to be here, and they got to come here, and I didn't get to come back here. But I love the area, so when I retired out of San Antonio after 20 years in the Air Force, I moved back here because I loved the outdoors and the mountains. In the military, I was an intelligence officer, did a lot of work around the United States, did a couple of tours, a year-long one, and then a 6-month one down in Saudi, and then in Iraq. Did several years in Latin America, because I do speak Spanish, and did some counter-narcotics, counterinsurgency work, and that did provide some of my background on stuff I've done here locally after I've gotten elected as being one of the anti-marijuana, et cetera, that has come up. A lot of questions always come up, and I have a lot of extensive background in that, so I'm able to speak from a perspective of having worked in that field, and the anti-marijuana, anti-drug field. Moving back here, I did 2 years at Northcom as a civilian, but then I got into teaching because I wanted to give back to my community. So I taught at Carmel Middle School, and I still substitute teach every now and then in District 2 on the south side. And then I got elected to county commissioner now 5 years ago. And so the El Paso County Commissioners, unlike a separation of mayor and council members, we have kind of the joint executive legislative decision-making in 5 county commissioners. And so in that aspect, we do a lot of the same things: potholes, roads infrastructure, snow removal, public safety, land use that is done in the municipalities, but in the unincorporated areas. So we will review land use decisions in unincorporated areas, such as Falcon is a good example of a larger area that is under the management of the county, not its own municipality or city. There are other things that the county does that a lot of people don't even know fall under us. So Department of Human Services falls under the county. Those decision makings of how they handle things are done by state or federal rules, but the employees are all county employees. And then we do a lot of things, clerk and recorders, DMV, the assessor, the treasurer, all fall under the county, and the sheriff's department. However, they are individually elected, but their budgets come from us. And so one of the most important things I would say right now that can be done, we are finishing up the budget process, and on the 16th of November, a Tuesday morning, you can come and make last-minute recommendations or changes to the budget, and we'll listen to the public and see if there's any last-minute changes, and then we'll do a final vote in early December. But I do always highlight that that second-to-last meeting is the one where the public can really make changes if they want into the budget and the emphasis. And so those are the kind of general things that the county does, and I think you'll see that your county commissioners are hands-on, try to make sure that we're fighting for our residents. We were also there in the example, if you're watching today, Commissioner Bremer and myself, along with Dave and others, but I think the three of us are really people setting the example of fighting for our residents, and I think you're going to continue to see that. And I think a lot of the background is important when you talk about religion and being involved. I did actually teach one of the practical government classes at the Charis Bible College last Friday, and I am a Sunday school teacher at my church, and so I try to give back into the community in any way that I can. So I'll be happy to take any questions here in a few minutes. Thank you.
I guess.
See what happens.
Testing. Hello, I'm Ivy Liu. When Longinos gets done with his commissioner spot, he's going to come teach at 49, the best district ever. Anyway, so I am nothing but honored and privileged and humbled for the results of the recent election. But I look at it as a victory for the people and the students of our county and our state. You people have spoken loud and clear about what you want for our county and hopefully eventually our state. But I need to refer to my notes so I don't forget anything. But I call it kind of a revolution of sorts, how firmly you spoke up and how you voted to put this sweep in place, a sweep across all of the El Paso County, except for 2 districts, which we'll work on in the next election. But it, also across the state and the country, the conservative majority is taking over school boards. And this is where we start with our children, to put them on the right path to achieve what they're supposed to achieve and not what our enemies want to push us towards. Anyway, so I can only speak for myself, but your voices, the community of D49, at least for me, and then for the other various districts, would be my guiding light. We will listen to you, and we will do what you ask of us. But most importantly, our first and single-minded focus is to put the kids' education back on track, to not just to get them average, but to get them soaring. Because that's America, right? If we just want to be average, we can just go to some other country. Anyway, I'm very much looking forward to strategizing and collaborating with our administration and the staff in D49. We hope to basically intensively gear our district towards academic achievements. And why is that important? Academic achievements is basically crucial towards a successful navigation of every child towards their individual pathway, whether it be college, military, entrepreneurship, or the skill trades. Whatever they want to do, they can do if they have the academic achievements. So along with that, one of my own personal goals, and actually is a very big goal, is to raise our children in the school district such that they become confident, self-advocating, productive adults in our society so we can make America greater than it ever was. I think that whole person approach is important, but it starts now with my fellow board members, and in D49, we have 5 out of 5 conservatives. Woohoo! Anyway, but the last thing I want to say is that we need the community's support. We can't do it by ourselves, and now that we have a 5 out of 5 conservative board, we don't have to fight anymore. It would be a cooperation. You parents would not be coming to board meetings to yell at the board because we're good to you and we're good for you, hopefully. But we need your involvement. We need for you to come on to some of the committees that we hope to form to make our schools better. So please don't stop being involved. Just because we have a really good board now, we need your involvement. We need to continue to hear from you as to how we can make things better. And we will be open to whatever it is that you have to say. Well, not everything, but some things.
Okay. Thank you, Ivy. Hi, my name is Mark Baisley, and I'm a member of the House of Representatives along with Stephanie Luck and a bunch of others, of course. I really appreciate everyone being here tonight. Thank you, Pastor Cowart, and thank you for leading that third year, the Practical Government School up there at Charis Bible College, in my district, by the way. And I get to participate in that third year in a row. I've got to teach a couple of days there, and that's just a joy to do. Anybody who was in my class last week, a couple weeks ago? There's one. There's you. So you would know then, as most of you would, what are the 3 branches of government? Remember those? You all know this stuff, right? So we're members of the legislative branch, right? And so what we say frequently is, we hear at the Capitol, is 33, 18, and 1. Anybody know the significance of that? So everything is a majority vote. Not everything, but virtually everything, and how bills get passed. There's 7 basic steps for a bill to get through the system. 3 steps in the House, 3 steps in the Senate, and then the governor. So in the House, there are 65 members in the House, and if you have at least 33 seats for your party, then you have the majority. Mm-hmm. In the Senate, there are 35 senators, and if you have at least 18, then you have a majority. And if you have that 1 governor's seat, then you have the majority there. You have that vote. So every bill needs a majority passing those 3 steps to go into law. Has to pass the House, has to pass the Senate, has to pass the governor's pen. We used to control all 3 of those. How long ago was that, do you suppose? When I say we, I'm speaking partisan in the Republican Party. Was that like decades? No, it was like 13 years ago. It was pretty darned recent. Now, there's books written about that, the blueprint. I'm sure many of you own and have read and so on, so we know how that took place. But it wasn't that terrible long ago, but look at where we're at now. Stephanie and I are 2 of 24 Republican members versus 41 Democrats in the House. And in the Senate, there are 15 Republicans to 20 Democrats. And then, of course, the governor. So it's like one of those questions you ask yourself, if you could do anything and know you would not fail, what would that be? And the Democrats ask themselves that all the time because nothing will stop them if they all decide, yeah, this is something we want to do. Well, goodness, there's a question asked of me recently by someone. I shouldn't say it was a question. It was more of a big criticism that I've heard before. A lot of us in elected office have heard before, but it struck me for some reason this time, and it was in response to the words that we frequently say in the minority, where we say, if you just give us back the majority, at least in one of the chambers, then we could stop the crazy. Mm-hmm. And if you gave us both chambers majority, then we could start reversing. And if we had those two and the governor's office, we could start reversing all this stuff. Well, someone asked me, yeah, but when you guys are in the majority, you don't do anything. Now, but I take that seriously, and I think we all should. It has actually just that, and I've heard it a dozen times at least, but when you guys are in office, you don't do anything. For some reason, it struck me more than it normally does, and I gave it some deep thought, and I'm thinking, you know, it's interesting, when you're on the left side of the aisle, you want to do everything you could possibly do to manage the people's behavior. And so when you have the supermajority control, you're going to take every step and you're going to start micromanaging everybody's behavior. But when you're on the liberty side of the aisle, then it doesn't occur to you, I'm going to control people's lives by passing laws that make them do good stuff. Instead, you kind of hold back and you go, we're just going to operate and do the things that government's supposed to do, and we're going to do it lean and efficiently, and we're going to treat the citizens as customers of each of the agencies, and we're going to kind of hold tight. Well, I think we're at a point where we need to start stepping up and being more assertive as Republicans to pass laws, to pass constitutional amendments that prevent the sort of things that we've been seeing, that we've been subject to, like managing our behavior, right? I mean, I saw last night, Jason Mikesell, you're going to hear from next, Sheriff of Teller County. He and I, this is the third time on stage together this week, you and me, I think, right? Anyway, and so we were at the Republican Executive Committee meeting up in Teller last night, and one of the county commissioners, Eric Stone, goes up and says, I've got to deliver the bad news about how COVID has been taking down a lot of our residents up here in Teller. And he described the deaths and the hospitalizations, and it's not a good moment for suffering COVID in Teller County right now. And so he delivered all this rough news, and everybody's kind of waiting, and then he ends it the way he should have ended it. He said, that doesn't mean we're going to give you any mandates. You just need to understand that you need to take care of yourselves. You need to be healthy. You need to, and just going on doing the prophylactic things. And then Sheriff Mikesell gets up and says, and load up your cupboards because, it's going to be rough around here with shortages and weather and so on. But these government officials do not say, and here's what you will do. Because that's the tenor at the Capitol right now. We have these conversations over bills, and it's interesting, these ideas that get tossed up, and then in the end, it's not, okay, that's a good idea, so maybe we all ought to stack up our cupboards three months in advance. No, the conversations end with, okay, so let's force all the people to stack up their cupboards for 3 months. And that's just this manner of thinking, and it's kind of nuts. But it's unnatural. So I want to remind everybody the quote that Pastor Cowart had up there of Benjamin Franklin earlier, where he said, he talked of the laws of God and of nature. That is close to the quote on the principles on which our nation was founded. In our opening statement of our founding document, we were founded on the laws of nature and of nature's God. The reason I am encouraged that we should keep with all enthusiasm and hope in winning back that majority for us is because we're not battling against our team versus the other team. It's not Broncos versus Raiders. This is natural versus unnatural. And so natural is what will just appeal to people if we just communicate well, keep ourselves rightly aligned with our Creator and how He intended for us to live in the first place. But I am very hopeful that we start winning back majorities because people are starting to realize this ain't natural. Anyway, thank you for joining.
Well, good evening. My name is Jason Mikesell. I'm the current sheriff of Teller County. Thank you. A little bit about me. I actually retired from law enforcement, and I thought, I'm never going back. One of the reasons I had that feeling, I thought law enforcement was becoming too political. I thought we had lost our way, we had lost our values and direction. So I retired. I started my own private company to go into private practice, doing security work. And then one day I got a phone call about 2 years after I'd retired from deputies and from citizens saying, hey, we have a severe problem in this county. The sheriff had left, there was no undersheriff, and they said, we need you to come back. And I had to really take a long pause to think about that. And it really was something that came over my heart, and I said, you know, maybe I need to go back, because I once had a wise man tell me, the only way to make a difference is by taking a step forward and not having any fear to do so. So I flew 26 hours. I got on every red flight from a foreign country I possibly could. I landed. I went to my first interview for that meeting. I ended that meeting 4 hours later with the current, or at the time, it was Dan May. He was one of my oral board interviewers. I was appointed sheriff 16 hours later, no sleep, and I went to the office the next day. So for somebody that wasn't going to go back into law enforcement at about 30 some hours, I was right back in the mix of it. But we had black market marijuana, we had cartel issues, we were facing a loss of 200% turnover every year. It was out of control because it had become a political agency. And there's something that we do as sheriffs. We administer oaths of office and we take an oath of office. And the pastor stole some of my thunder a second ago. In that oath, what it says is that I will support the Constitution, right? I will support the Constitution of the state of Colorado, and I will support the laws of the state of Colorado. Nowhere in that oath does it say I will support mandates or resolutions. During COVID, I became a little bit of a rebel. Because what I said was, I don't care what public health says. I will not enforce criminally on anyone anything that has to do with a mask. I will educate, but I will not enforce. I will not shut down a business. I will not enforce those things. And what happened was, really, we had good commissioners. We have citizens. Our citizens, and you all, are what give authority to politicians to make decisions, correct? The problem is you have to take that back. The strongest way to do that is at the local level, right? The tree is always stronger at its trunk. It's at its base, its roots. You're the grassroots that make that trunk strong. And the thing about it is that I think a lot of politicians forget, you vote them into office. They become sick with power and they become fat with the thought that they can tell people what they do on a daily basis. If we start allowing that to occur, then we've lost what made this country free. And that home with free and home with the brave, that's an important piece. You have to be brave enough to stand up for yourselves and say, no, I'm not doing it. Now, I got the shot. I had COVID twice. I got it here when it first came here because I refused. I went out anyways. I stayed home. I got through the sickness. I'm still here. And the thing about it was that I believe anybody that wants to go get the shot, go get it. That's your right. It's your body, right? But no one's going to tell you that you have to do it. So, and I feel strongly about that. I don't think it's law enforcement's place to enforce any type of a civil action, unless it's a court order and that we're mandated to do, say, by a court, right? That's the only time. And that's actually argued in court. So take back your power. Know that law enforcement should support you in your endeavors. Sheriff's a little different than police departments, right? A sheriff's department is elected by the people for the people, and that's where we derive our power. A police department's a little bit different. I can get away with a lot more sometimes. I only have one person that really matters to me what you think, and that's you. Individually, because each individual has a vote, right? And if I get enough votes, I get to stay in office. If I don't get enough votes, I have to go home. So really what we're seeing across the United States is people starting to stand up and take their power back. And I would say you need to stand up and take office. Everybody thinks it should be somebody else's idea. If you look across the Republican Party in all different voting areas, what do you see? there's people you don't agree with. And if you don't agree with them, then you need to stand up and you need to take that step forward. Don't fear, because that's the one thing where you give up your power, right? When you fear, you allow others to take control of your life. And you have all the power in the world. It took me a long time to understand it, even as a sheriff. You know, we lead men and women on a battlefield now. It's not like it used to be. I thought when I joined up to be a sheriff, it was going to be easy. Right? I was going to talk to the deputies. I was going to give some understanding of morals and ethics and direction. And I was going to have coffee and breakfast every morning and walk around. And you know what? It was the farthest thing that I could ever have imagined. I tell people that we're everything from a Norman Rockwell picture with the law enforcement officer leaning over to talk to the young man to Arnold Schwarzenegger on about a 5-minute direction. I have a lieutenant with me tonight, Renee Bunting. She's the person that helps me get through all these things. And it's funny, I would go from a public meeting to strapping on a vest and kicking indoors with my SWAT team during the cartel issues, and then going to the state to tell them how bad it was, leading media in so that the public could actually see. And the funny thing was, when black market marijuana started, was you had a state government saying, hey, it's okay. There is no cartels in this state. There is no black market marijuana. Baloney. It was destroying our communities. And what did you see start to happen with sheriffs? They started stepping forward and going after those cartels. They started stopping the black market marijuana, which then stops the illegal movement of peoples and the repression of peoples that are coming in this country. There was all kinds of issues that started to pop up. But everybody feared that you'd be sued. Everybody fears that law enforcement is going to have all these huge liabilities. And we did. I was sued more times than I can even remember. But the one thing I always said in court was that I'm protecting my community. And you know what? The judges believed me, and we won every case that came against us with it. So don't fear. Have faith. Have faith in your heart of what you do. Have faith in the good Lord. And just understand that you are the power behind the badge and the power behind your votes and this country. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Martin, and I think Ken gave me a promotion. He said I was the head of CHEC. I am not the head of CHEC. I am the director of government relations, but I got started when my kids, I have 3 children, and I homeschooled them from the beginning, and I got started in government just going up to the Capitol and praying once a month while they were in high school. That's how I started. And then for 4 years, I served as the lobbyist for CHEC, and I looked after parental rights, religious liberty, and home education, and delved into all the bad things they were doing to education at the same time. And now I am the director of government relations because during session, I serve with Representative Luck as her policy director. So, John Adams said, a constitution of government once changed from freedom can never be restored. Liberty once lost is lost forever. Guess what? We're losing our liberties every day, and we're at that precipice. And so it's up to us. And I think I want to encourage you that God always uses a remnant, a small band of people who will do what is right. Thomas Jefferson said, can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift of God, that they are not to be violated but with his wrath. Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever. See, our Second Amendment talks about a well-regulated militia, but we need a well-informed citizenry to keep our Constitution and freedoms. Galatians 5:1 said, "It is for freedom that Christ set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." All the nations across the world are looking to us because they are enslaved. They are much further down the road than we are. In 2019, when the current administration took over, we saw a barrage of bills just come through that took out, pretty much just decimated every jurisdiction that God made. God made 4 jurisdictions: self-government, the family government, church government, and civil government. Well, the civil government has gobbled up all those other governments. And they did that in 2019 when we lost some control in the Senate to stop that. We didn't have that backstop anymore. In 2020, we saw COVID, so we had a shortened session, thankfully. But the theme that year was Christians are hateful. There were many, many bills that went through that talked about how traditional values, that was hateful. Parental rights, hateful. Family, hateful. All these things, marriage between a man and a woman, God made us male and female. That was all hate. That's what we saw in 2020. 2021, this last year, let me tell you what Polis told us in his State of the State address. He said, coming out of this traumatic year, we are poised for bold transformational change. If we seize the opportunity here in the chamber, we will finally live up to our fullest potential to truly create a Colorado for all. He wants to fundamentally change Colorado, and I can tell you in 2021, he did a pretty good job of that. He also said this: we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to not just build back stronger than we were before the pandemic, but fundamentally reimagine Colorado's future. I kind of liked Colorado before he got a hold of it. So what we heard just about every day that we were up there was an assault against Christians in the way that they talked to us. They said we were racist, we were white privileged, we were white supremacist, and we really didn't have an answer for them. So I was pretty sad about that. They talked about restorative justice and environmental justice, and they redistributed the wealth across the board. They imposed on families burdens of fees and surcharges and indirect costs. They took away parental rights. They did diminish religious liberty. But you know what? God has been faithful through it all. We have seen that. And so we need to hold strong and hold firm to him. Is that my time? Seriously? I had so much more to say. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting me come up to your county and spend some time with all of you. I am actually going to pick up a little bit where Carolyn left off. We didn't coordinate remarks in any way, shape, or form. And I'll ask the sheriff. It says at the top there, fundamentally transform Colorado, doesn't it? Yes. Yeah, thank you. He said yes. It does say that, even if you can't see it. He must trust me that that's a good sign. But I wanted to share similar remarks to what Carolyn shared with you, because for our governor to cast such a vision, it's a bold vision. Fundamentally transform Colorado. That was the entirety of his State of the State address. Over and over, that was what we heard. He wants to fundamentally transform Colorado. Think about that. Transforming means to take something and make it something entirely different. Fundamentally is from the ground up. We're not talking about tweaks. We're not talking about maybe a few improvements here or there. We're not talking about a fresh coat of paint or a new window. We're not even talking about, if you think in terms of those home design shows, about an open concept versus some walls between your living room and dining room or kitchen. We're talking about gutting the entire thing, uprooting the foundation, possibly not even building in the same site. Completely transforming. And we've seen that. There were 623 bills that were submitted for consideration in the General Assembly. For consideration in 80 days. That's 8 bills a day, and as Representative Baisley noted, it has to go through at least 6 steps in order to get out of the General Assembly. So you can gather how deep we go on a lot of those bills. Of those 623, 508 were passed. And of those 508, I would say the vast majority did just what Governor Polis laid out. They fundamentally transformed Colorado. They upended what we understand to be our nation's mission statement. You know the one, right? The famous one in the Declaration of Independence starts out with, "We hold these truths." I don't have to say the whole thing, I only have 5 minutes. But you know, and if we took every single word of that one statement and we expressed what the founders meant by it, starting with the word "we," meaning one body, they fundamentally upended it. In many of my colleagues' minds, we're no longer a we. We're no longer an America, a united place. We're a group of people who live geographically proximate, who are actually better defined by tribes, better defined by race, better defined by age or gender or one other category or another. We are no longer we. And I could walk through every single word of that one statement in the Declaration and point to you legislation that was passed that shows that they genuinely want to fundamentally transform Colorado. And the question that I would have is that good? Right? Maybe that's a good thing. I have a colleague and he says, ideas have consequences, bad ideas have victims. In my analysis of where we're headed, we're creating a lot of victims with the ideas that we're embracing. The idea of changing our very foundation, changing the idea that rights come from God, not from the state. That's a bad idea. Because the minute that the state is the sovereign over all things, is the God over all things, is the minute that nobody actually has rights, especially not the minority, especially not those people who have dissenting views. And yet this is the trajectory that we're walking down. So then my question is, how do we stop this? And how is this actually being embraced? How is it? How is it that all of us, no matter the age, would allow for these things? And I go back to Romans 12, where it talks about transformation coming as a result of the renewing of our minds. And if you look at the way that these ideas were implemented, these bills were implemented, they were implemented under the guise of a new narrative, right? So things like, we need to address the equity, inclusion, diversity question. We need to address climate change. We need to address one of these, what I called qualified justice topics, environmental justice, social justice, as Carolyn mentioned some of them. These are the narratives that are being used in order to renew our minds on these topics. But again, as believers, we have to go back to the true fact checker, which is our Bible, and say, is this true? Is this right? Is this good? Is this beautiful? Is this what we want? And renew our minds there. And unless we're doing that, a lot of what's coming out of Denver can sound sweet. It can have that hiss of the snake for so many who think this is good. This is a way to right all of these wrongs. And so I would just encourage all of us to be transformed, but to be transformed through Scripture, to be transformed through the Word of God. And then from that place, to help others renew their mind. Because if we want to fundamentally transform Colorado back to where we were, it's going to take that kind of work. And then the other thing to point out, we'll have to wait.
All right. Great job, everyone. Let me just make a couple things. First off, I would like to say that I love all of you. I am now moving to Teller County. I'm just saying. And one thing that I think came up, especially towards the end there, was language. right? If you can control the language, you can control the culture. And you hear words like reimagine, right? What did we hear a lot in 2020? We need to reimagine policing, right? These nice flowery words. And so I would argue they've controlled the language, and therefore it has allowed them to control the culture. And it's because they tell us things that they use wording that sounds really great and it's attractive. Who wants to not be equitable, right? So they use these really attractive words to draw people in. And so it is our job to take back the language so that we can seize the culture. So with that, Ann is down here with the microphone. I've already given you the rules.
That's right, and the boss is going to be watching, so be careful. Okay, I have some announcements, but while I'm making my announcements, if you would like to start a queue, my daughter-in-law is from Britain, and I learned that word, queue. If you would like to start a queue, a line to come up and ask your questions. But here's just some important announcements for you. This meeting was or is being recorded. You can access it on YouTube at Culture Impact Team or at www.cultureimpact.us. So this is our final meeting for this session, but we want you to mark your calendars. So our General Assembly goes back on January 12th. We think that's interesting because 12 is the number of government. And so CFAN and CIT, we're going to come together and we're going to have a prayer meeting that night for y'all. And so more details to follow about that, but get that on your calendar. That'll be January 12th of 2022. If you do not receive our emails, be sure to sign up on our list back there where Linda is. She can wave at you. And we also have a lot of good information back there. Always be sure to check at our table. A couple things I want to highlight. Stephanie has a table back there. Carolyn has a table as well. Stephanie's actually giving away constitutions, so you can go back and pick that up. We also have a contact list for all of our speakers tonight. And on the back of that, how many of you know who Kevin Lundberg is? I get his newsletter, and you should be also. Here's what I like about his newsletter. It's down and dirty. It's the Cliff Note version of what's going on. And even though he's in Larimer County, it's things that are affecting all of us. So if you haven't signed up for his newsletter, I really encourage you to do that. And we've got a fact sheet back there for how you can do that, as well as Carolyn's link back there too. And then finally, if you are a member for Church for All Nations, our CIT team, every Sunday, if you go out these back doors, that first door on the left is called the Create Room. And we are there in between services every Sunday. So if you have questions, comments, just come and drop by, and then you can visit with us. Okay, so that's all my announcements. So come on up. I'm going to hold the mic for you.
I just heard the last comment because I was in a different meeting today. The idea, the thought that he who controls the language controls the debate, that really caught my eye because, earlier for so many years, for the last, I think, 20, 30 years, I've heard the word, the Democrats were called liberals. But all of a sudden, this last year, a couple of years, they've been called progressives. Progressive is a very positive word. Liberal is a pretty lousy word, I mean, it labels them. So my question is, how do we change the narrative and stop calling the liberals as progressives? And is there some way we can disseminate that information and nationally take a stand to call them liberals once again so that people know that they're liberals and not progressives?
That actually was for me. There were supposed to be no questions for me, but I'll take it. I don't know, call them demons. No. You know what? First off, as a believer, we endeavor to view everyone as a child of God. And so I believe you change how just how they see themselves by calling those things that be not as though they were. And so you call them, you know what, you are a child of God. God loves you. God wants to see you uphold righteousness. You love on those people. You pray with those people. You pray for those people. We talk about it every week in my class. We will pray for Joe Biden, right? We're going to pray for his salvation, and with his salvation, we're going to pray that God would move on his heart and change how he thinks and acts. And so I think you start by viewing everyone as a child of God. You treat them that way, and it'll be surprising what you'll see come back your way.
So my question really has to do with, as citizens, how do we approach the whole thing of, we have elected officials, and then we have bureaucrats or people that are paid to. Recently, I ran into a situation where someone, I'm talking about the county or city level, but someone had said to me, who was paid, said, "You understand why I can't let you talk to my guy?" Well, my guy happened to be elected official, and I was thinking, wait a minute, something's screwed up there. What the first thing I said, as citizens, how do we maneuver that so that we can get our investigation straight to our elected official?
Well, thank you for the question. All the contacts for all your elected officials gets put out regularly. The Gazette actually does a good job of putting out all our information, but our information is out there publicly, so you can send us emails. You can call us. In my area, we had somebody who show up at our board meetings, and I know the city council has their board meetings that you can go to. We at our public comments, we have that as part of our agenda at every board meeting. We meet on Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. and you can come up, make your statements, ask your questions, and get a response from us maybe afterwards, or you can come up and say, "Hey, I'd like to schedule a meeting with you one-on-one." And you can do that at our board meetings. But I take meetings all the time. Somebody contacts me for an email or on a phone call, and sometimes they're actually surprised. I call, I didn't think you'd call me back. And sometimes it's 3 or 4 hours. Sometimes it's the next day. But you'll see responses from those elected officials that care about the people, and sometimes you don't get responses, and you need to hold them accountable. But I always say we should be open. We hold town halls. Come to our town halls, and you can answer those questions there, or come to our board meetings, and we meet weekly, 9 a.m., and public comments are always part of that.
Next, can I add to that? Is that okay? Great question, Sue. Thank you for that. I was reminded by fellow state representative Kevin Van Winkle some years ago when, and I'll tell you the incident, you all heard about it. It was a shooting at STEM School, which was a school I helped form, but the school exists in Kevin Van Winkle's, Representative Van Winkle's district. So, we all go rushing there to the school and was like, what do we do? And we're looking at each other, one senator and 2 of us state reps, and Kevin says, we're representatives. Let's represent the people. It was a moment for me of kind of putting on the shoulder pads and going, oh yeah, I'm not just there debating the constitutionality of a proposed bill. I was elected to represent 80,000 people, and they can't be where we can go sometimes. So let's be what they would like us to be in that moment. And I think that's, well, thank you, but credit Kevin Van Winkle for pointing that out to me. But we can do a lot just with that title. The title is strong, and in fact, it's revered within the Capitol, where no one tells Representative Luck that she has to wear a mask in the Capitol, because Representative Stephanie Luck represents 80,000 people, and the notion of saying you have to wear a mask is the same as saying all of you people have to wear a mask. Or if she wants to go up and make a statement before the committee of the whole, she's always given that that position to give that expression because she represents those people. There's power in this position that we're elected to, and the way we can exercise it, to your question, Sue, is when someone is being done wrong, sometimes all it takes is to call up and say, "Hi, this is State Representative Mark Baisley, and I need you to make this right." And sometimes we just go to the head of a whole agency when they're behaving badly and to say, "I need you to figure this out and fix this for this constituent of mine and a customer of yours." And you just have to be hard on them. And even to the point, something I did once where I asked our district attorney to bring criminal charges against the head of the state health agency for falsifying death certificates, changing them from heart attack to COVID. So we represent, and we need to never forget that, and to step up. And when someone is in a weak position, we step up and we're strong for them. That's our role, and we ought to take it. So.
Thank you very much for being here tonight. We really appreciate you. To the three officials who are on the live stream today for the Health Board resolution, my question is to you. Could you please quickly tell me what your perception of what is the purpose of that resolution? And if someone needs to give like a little summary of what happened today, that would be beneficial, I think. Thanks.
Okay. So, the last meeting of the El Paso County Board of Health, before that, the county commissioners had passed a resolution essentially saying that, hey, vaccines may or may not be, well, they're okay, but no one should be forced to take them. Is that kind of accurate, Longinos? No mandates. Some members of the Board of Health, one in particular, I think, thought that was a bad thing for the county commissioners to have done. And I'm speaking pretty straight here, and wanted for the El Paso County Board of Health to kind of respond with another resolution, right, saying that, well, hey, everybody here supports immunizations, COVID immunizations. Even the city council, the county commissioners, everybody should be out there recommending it, right? Because that was, if you listened in, or you can still read this resolution, I think, online. That was at the end of it. So that sort of sets the stage for what happened today. Today was never about a mandate. It was about this resolution saying that these are good. It's the best way to deal with this. That's what we all think, signed by our president of the Board of Health, our chair. So then what happened today was, let me think. A lot happened today. My view on it was that I don't believe the Board of Health has ever put out a resolution for any other immunization. Right? That, to me, that's significant. Why are we doing it now? It doesn't address real, what I perceive as risks involved with the vaccination, especially for children, all right, younger kids. There are at least 400 cases of myocarditis in one study. There's probably a lot more. The risk to children, and I won't go too long here, but the risk to children is tiny. I believe in all of the United States, I heard two numbers today, and one of them lined up with what I thought I had read. I asked the pediatrician, which they brought in, to give me some of this data, and he really didn't have it. But it's about 438 kids have passed away, a tragedy, very sad, with COVID since the start of this. I believe only 15 of those had no pre-existing conditions that contributed to it. So are we going to really push for all children to be immunized? There are risks to the immunizations, the 15 that have passed away. I don't think it's right for us to immunize little kids to protect 85-year-olds or to protect me, right? I don't agree with that. So that's some of the reasons that I think I would say I spearheaded this. Nope, not a good idea. And really, so what I asked to have done is let's table this. That means we just put this back on the table. We don't do this today. And in fact, initially they weren't going to hear the statements by the citizens until, and again, I'm not trying to blow my own horn, but here I am. I'm going to blow it until I said, no, I'm not going to vote for that unless we let all the citizens speak first, right? That's the way Longinos and the other county commissioners do it at county commission. That's the way we do it at the city council. So, okay, so then that happened. You folks and the others that testified, that came in there and showed passion for one thing, but facts for another. We had 3 doctors talk, several nurses, just informed citizens, right? They talked about some personal experiences with themselves after the shot or with kids. And just some of the stuff I just said, they repeated that. They brought it up. And so in the end, and it went on for a long time, which was good, in the end, it started off, I was the only one initially to say, I won't vote for this, I'll table it. At the end, Longinos seconded that, right? He had reservations also right from the get-go. And in the end, everybody, all of them voted to table it after the people spoke, right? And that's what has to happen, right? And we have to be sure, and we're going to do better at this, I will, of letting everybody know before a meeting like what happened today is out there, right? So that's the quickie from me, and now here's from Longinos.
I'll just add one part of that. Again, I do think it was a individual at our last Board of Health meeting who took offense to the commissioners passing a no mandates resolution, wanting to bring something like this, and then some good intentions by some other Board of Health members, but it was promoted because of somebody trying to push back at the county commissioners. And what you saw at the end was residents come out, speak up, and their voices were heard. At the beginning, there was a little bit of an issue with what resolution was the accurate one information, and I hope it's okay to mention about a side conversation. We took a 5-minute break. And Dave and I thought, Dave's like, hey, I want to do this. And I say, I'll support you on the tabling. I think it's going to then get failed. That vote would fail, and then we're going to have to go back into and debate the actual language further. And then 100 people spoke, and at the end, when we thought we were going to have a motion, a second, and then lose, it was a unanimous tabling. And somebody said that while we were discussing that, here a prayer group was actually praying for something like that to happen, and it actually happened because we were surprised. We did not, we thought maybe we get a split vote or something, and it ended up tabling because the people spoke.
Hi, my name is Denise, and I too was at that health board meeting today. I do want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I know it's been a long day for some of you with some of these crazy meetings. But my question for you is this, and Dave specifically, thank you for the questions that you pushed back on those physicians who knew nothing. I love that Colorado Children's Hospital doctor who knew no statistics, and I knew them all. At any rate, here's my question for you. I would like to know if all of you as elected officials, do you know about the VAERS website, thevaers.com? Do you understand, and have you looked at virologists talking about the fact that this vaccine was created for the first version of COVID, And we are well past that. So we are trying to enforce something that will not attack the variants, period. So I fail to understand. So my question is, have you done that? Each and every one of you, have you looked into virologists talking about the validity of that vaccine? Because it was good for the first round. Now, I've had COVID, so I don't need it. I've got natural immunity, which is as good or better than the vaccine. I'd like to know, have you looked into that?
So, yeah, I'll start. In my first 5 minutes, I talked about, hey, I was an SF guy, a Green Beret. I was the medic on a team, 18 Delta. Then I went to PA school, so I'm a physician assistant. I've given freaking thousands of shots in the Army before we deploy, we have to get a lot of shots. So I know all about VAERS. I know exactly what you're talking about. One of my points today was all those shots I gave those guys, except for the anthrax, and I had that one too, have been tested. They've gone through a normal safety protocol, right, of an extended period. If you saw it, I asked the doc, have there been long-term studies on this in children? And Longinos told me later, oh, that was a bad question, Dave, because obviously there haven't been any. I was like, yeah, that was my point, right? Yeah. That was exactly it. So I'm on board with exactly what you're saying. You have to play chess when you're doing that today. So I can't just blurt out everything I believe in my heart. I'm like setting a trap or working. No, seriously. And that's the way you have to do it, right? Because what we want is we want to win. We don't just want to feel good. And I want to win. So.
If you listen as well, I had asked various questions on the research I had been doing and hadn't gotten a lot of answers back to my response, and that was something I had brought up. I'm not exactly sure of the website you're speaking about, but in terms of the research, I've been doing the research as well, and I've been getting a lot of information from various other elected officials and professionals.
I want to say one more thing. If I could get one more minute, I want to tell you why this is important, because I guess this is recorded, but I'll tell you the truth. Is when I got onto city council, the county commissioners, there was someone else from city council on the board of health, right? But I have a background as a PA, a physician assistant, a medical guy, and so and again, this isn't going to win me any friends, maybe, with certain people. I can ask those questions, right? I understand that lingo. So it's good for me to be there. And I appreciate that Longinos and others gave me that opportunity by appointing me to the board. So I wanted to point that out.
How to place a satellite in its proper orbit, but I don't have the medical background. But I've got common sense like everybody else. So certainly immunity, our natural immunity, would be built to understand the signature of that actual virus. So those who have contracted COVID-19 would build up a natural immunity against that very disease. But an engineered vaccination, mRNA, that is coming in from another angle, and again, I don't understand that much, but it sure makes sense to me that if you're taking the vaccination and you're still getting the disease, then it's not working yet. It's not preventing. It doesn't have the signature of the disease, at least not in its entirety, and stopping. So anyway, I look at it and all the arguments about, gee, we need everybody to get vaccinated so that you don't spread the COVID to someone else. Well, wait a minute, and it's just like masks. You need to wear a mask so that you're not infecting other people. Anyway, it's just the backward thinking is kind of crazy. I heard a talk this morning on my favorite radio station, and I'll probably offend all my other radio friends, but Kim Monson, if you're able to hear her on 560, she has the most amazing radio show early in the morning. And she had someone on this morning who she asked him the question, why the press? Why the big push for everyone getting this vaccination? And he concluded, but very methodically and in a very reasoned fashion and very informed expert fashion, what we always suspect from the beginning. It's just the money that's made by Big Pharma, who has looked at, and the way he put it, he said Big Pharma looks at the two parties and goes, well, this one's not going to go force everybody to take my product, but this one will, and so I'm going to get behind them, and they're going to answer to us. I'm afraid that just makes sense to me. So, yeah, I'm sorry I don't have a lot more understanding about it, but I do not think it should be forced on anyone, especially for that reason.
And I want to talk about, as a lobbyist, I've been pushing against CDPHE for many years because of their rulemaking around mandating vaccines. And in 2019, we held a health summit, and I participated in that. So in the last 2019, 2020, 2 years, 3, whatever, how many ever years it's been, fighting against their school entry immunization stuff. Yes, I'm very aware of theirs and all of that. And I just want to point out that Representative Baisley ran a bill and got it passed. Hallelujah. That was God. You know that, right? That says that parents cannot be investigated for abuse just because their children are not vaccinated. Hallelujah. And then he's run a couple of years, he's run bills to say that employers can't discriminate against you for their vaccine status, but they failed, unfortunately. But so we have been hounding Representative Baisley for years about this issue, and I think he's well versed in this by now. And so, and Representative Luck this year ran a bill to say doctors can't be punished and pharmacists can't be punished for prescribing ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. It didn't pass, but they are in the trenches and in the fight, and I just want to let everybody know that.
Thank you, Carolyn. And to the question, yes, I am familiar with that database and some of the others that exist, and am doing increasing amounts of research on this topic, not only to inform some bills that I may run, but also to inform some actions that some of us are contemplating against the executive branch. So it is a topic.
Completely different topic now, election integrity. Part of this fundamental transformation that happened 12 so years ago is this Soros paid for election system with mail-in ballots and electronic counting and balloting. My question is, how do we fundamentally transform it back to what it was? The key things are no more mail balloting, in-person voting with write-in ballots, with photo ID, no electronic counting. Start with our commissioner, because supposedly you have the power to end all that.
Yeah, that's not accurate. That's why. So the legislature, so those are the rules that are set by the state. We can do things like ensure that the clerk and recorder who runs it is running it, and that we ask for volunteers that are vigilant and watching every aspect of a election, so that there is nothing funny going on during the election. And so those are the kind of things we handle at the local level. The rules that you're talking about would have to come from the state, and so I'm going to have to defer onto the aspect of how difficult that is when you have, as was mentioned, the governor, the Senate, and the state house under the Democrat or the liberals, let's speak the language properly.
So I read the statutes a little bit differently than you, Commissioner Lohino. So I'm sorry, and I'm open to looking at the statutes that you're referencing. My reading of a number of the statutes suggests that the the local election official, the DEO of the school board, the DEO of the special district, the DEO of the county, has the ability to determine, and the county commissioners, those decision-making entities at the local levels have the ability to determine, at least insofar as relates to the use of electronic machines for any purpose. And so there is, in my reading of the statutes, there is a may there in terms of they may use these electronic machines for taking votes, for tabulating votes, for doing a whole host of those things. And so because of the climate in Denver, it is unlikely that we would get in the near future a transformation back to what many would say is a true integrity election system. But there are options that I see at the local level that are worth pursuing, and I may be completely wrong in my analysis. I suspect that you're speaking from what your county attorneys have shared with you, but I think that it's worth challenging and bringing before court and putting it forth and saying, this is what we're going to do in our district, this is how we're going to administer elections here, and having a suit brought against that and see where the chips fall.
So, thank you. We are at time. We're going to go over a little bit if you guys want to, because I still have 3 more people with questions. But just a reminder, childcare is done. So if you have children, you need to go get them and you can bring them back in. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Danielle, and I first wanted to say to our county commissioners, thank you for holding the line and asking some questions today and letting the public speak. And I'm very proud of the people of El Paso County for standing up. I was very proud of our people that showed up today. To our state representatives, kind of thinking forward and in reference to what you were saying about needing to be proactive. I know that other states are looking at digital driver's license, and they're modeling that in Utah as a potential where it would essentially have people's health records, financial reports, credit score, travel records, vehicle registration, voting information, spending habits, and licenses, along with social credit score, and Mississippi is looking at the same. What can we do as Colorado constituents to ensure that we're taking proactive steps at that type of tracking that goes to the government and government agencies and essentially takes away our individual liberties and rights? What can we do to be proactive with that, both through our legislators and as a state level? Does that mean petitions, or is there something that we can do to support you in putting up a preventative wall?
Thank you, and thanks for the question, Danielle. So yeah, just generally speaking, as I was saying in my opening remarks, government has a mission given by our founding document that says the purpose of government is to ensure our rights and the rights endowed to us by our Creator. So when those on the left get in office and they start thinking, I call it the wouldn't it be cool syndrome, wouldn't it be cool if we also put on driver's license all this information? Where do they get that right? Where do they get that power? Well, the powers are given to them by the consent of the governed, right? We haven't given them that kind of power. So, but where I've arrived just in the last couple of years in living down there at the Capitol is that we need to start blocking these things. And the most powerful way we can do it, where the citizens are very involved, is in changing our Constitution by ballot, by the ballot box. Because we can, through petition, get measures on the ballot. And I would like to see us start exercising that to where we say, and I don't know how exactly to place it there, but that government has no role in collecting, storing, processing, sharing information about us individuals. None of their business. That's not a role that we are giving them. And so you don't have it. But rather than our thinking, well, gee, it's not in the Constitution anywhere to give it to them, we need to go block it. And we need to start doing that over and over and over and just putting them in the box to where they can do no more than this. And I don't have that all the way thought through, but I'm putting that out there hoping that everybody will think about this and that we collectively hire those those brilliant attorneys who can capture those in the legal wording that becomes a constitutional amendment that limits the power of our state government and starts stopping them from doing all this nutty stuff and taking over our health care and so on. We need to just block them before we get there. So.
And I would just add to that, if I could, quickly. So that proposal is being considered in both Mississippi and Utah. And some of the commentaries on it in terms of what can citizens do include things like getting rid of your smartphone, because your smartphone is what is going to be used to facilitate that. And so going back to a dumb phone, which has some other unintended consequences, I recognize. But at some point we have to start to consider these broader pushbacks in light of what Representative Baisley said. And I was actually on the same train. That's where I was going to in terms of consent of the governed. I will tell you that we're already at that point. So I don't know how many of you know, but a bill was passed, one of many, as I noted before. One of the 508 bills this year says now that all of your prescription information is stored on a state database, all of it. So when you get a prescription from anyone, from your family counselor to your orthopedic, what have you, I mean, any medical professional, that goes into a statewide database. And we're talking about a page to 2 pages of personally identifiable information, everything from your name and address and social security number to the dosage of each prescription. And then when you get that prescription fulfilled, that information is again inputted into that database. So this is already happening in terms of collection of data. And I am not on the health committees. I'm not on either of them. I don't know, Representative Baisley, if you heard that particular bill, but I am on the Finance Committee. And when that bill came to Finance, because it's a pretty onerous, a pretty substantial bill to create this kind of a database, there were very few people who testified. And I'm not even sure if I remember one person who testified in opposition. And what that ends up doing in the General Assembly is building into this idea that what the majority is proposing is fully supported by the citizenry. They come and they stand at the floor and they say, see, nobody is against this, everybody is supportive of it, so you few people who are standing against it, you're just detached from reality. You're in the minority and you don't really know what the people want. And so I would say the very first thing to do is monitor the website of the General Assembly and make sure you know what bills are being heard. And I know it happens at breakneck speed, and I know that things get changed constantly, and I know it is a challenge to get to Denver. Thankfully, this last year we were able to Zoom in testimony. I don't know if that will be the case in the years to come, but we need to have people there who can say, just as you saw today in your meeting with the health board, who can say, no, enough is enough, we're not going to do this. But then going beyond that to once it is a law, I think we need to really have strong conversations about what civil disobedience looks like in this era. What does that look like? What does Scripture tell us about civil disobedience? What does it look like to rescue those who are perishing? What does it look like to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with our God? What does it look like to resist unrighteousness and evil? And we need to have those conversations and seriously be open to the sacrifice that will be entailed in answering them.
First, I'd like to thank you for that statement. And then, Mark, I'd like to thank you for educating us, because I've never heard of the "wouldn't that be cool" syndrome. So that was a good education as well. So if you'll indulge me, 2 short statements that leads to my question. Well, you have to, I can't ask the question without 2 short historic statements that leads to the question. Okay, one is, since I was a little tyke, I've heard ignorance of the law is no excuse to disobey the law. Okay, that's one. Number 2 is you have to hire a lawyer to read the law for you, because there's no way that you can read it and understand it yourself, so you have to have a lawyer. So my question for all of you, whoever is involved in legislation, is it possible for you to write statutes, legislation, that is void of any legalese, so that any of us can pick up a statute, because we're monitoring, like you're suggesting, monitoring what's going on in statutes that's being promulgated, and read it and clearly understand it ourselves so that we could obey it or stand up against it.
So the legislature, interestingly enough, us legislators aren't allowed to write our own legislation. So we send our ideas in template language, if we have it, down because they're in the basement, sorry, you wouldn't know that. We send it to the Office of Legislative Legal Services, which is a group of lawyers that is hired by the General Assembly, and they actually draft it. And there's a whole manual that they use in order to determine what is good legislative language, what's not. And oftentimes the language itself is pretty straightforward. It is written in plain English for the most part with definition section and all of that's well. This trouble comes in when you start to connect it with the other parts of statute and the other regulations. And so if you just read a bill, you could read a one-page bill and say, this makes perfect sense. But then when you see it in context of the particular volume of the CRS, and then when that is linked to whatever regulations some executive agency has promulgated or some county has issued in terms of what's going on in theirs, then that becomes more and more complex. And that's often when you need that legal advice, because hopefully, presumably, those lawyers would then be able to know all of those connections that you may not be able to see right off the bat in just reading the one statute.
Can I add to that real quick?
Oh, sure.
Because I agree with that gentleman. I read these laws all the time, and they should fire some attorneys, right? The issue that we run into a lot of times is they build in loopholes that are issues. And if you truly had attorneys looking at these and look at the fact that a lot of these are unfunded mandates that come back on taxpayers and counties, they wouldn't be able to push these forward and approve them. And they would give us a lot of time to be able to review these laws before they go into effect. A lot of the laws that were wrote in the last 500 and some, they were so quickly done. Those professionals, sheriffs, police officers, folks that are elected into positions, never had a chance to even look at them, because they're allowing ACLU attorneys to actually look at them and help with the development of those. So to your point, I agree with you.
You've been so quiet, Sheriff Mikesell. So this question is primarily directed to you. It's about oaths, and all of you take an oath to defend the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic. Now, courts can be an enemy. Agencies can be an enemy. Police officers can be an enemy. And what concerns me is, I look at you, Sheriff, and I looked at a member of law enforcement out in the lobby, and what I was thinking, when push comes to shove, what side are they going to be on? Because I watch what happens in Canada, I watch what's happening in Australia. It's amazing. And I can't believe that I'm at the point now where I'm looking at law enforcement in the United States wondering, what are they going to do? So my question is, say, you are apprised that the FBI has a potential, a person they'd like to question about January 6th, or somebody that writes for Project Veritas. What are you going to do as sheriff when you hear or you're told that the FBI or the Joint Terrorism Task Force is going to visit them?
I get this loaded question a lot. Here's the issue with these things. So as a sheriff, I really have one main duty. Well, I have several main duties, but one of my biggest main duties, and Colorado law has put that in effect, is that I'm to keep the peace, right? Law enforcement as sheriffs, we are peacekeepers, above and beyond anything else. Now, if a federal agency has a federal warrant for something, they have jurisdiction. That's what they are supposed to do. Now, here's the other side of that, though. Do they have the right to hold somebody without a court appearance? Do they have the right to hold somebody without? No. But that is also something the Justice Department is supposed to deal with. They have the rights through their attorneys to be able to be seen and heard in a court within so many days. That's something that the federal jurisdiction does. As a local jurisdiction, we can't hinder their investigation, but we also can question, hey, why is it you're here? What are you doing? And do you have the legal warrants in place to do so? Will we come to confront them? No. And here's why. Law enforcement agencies across the United States are made up of good people. They're the sons and daughters, husbands, wives of citizens. And they're citizens. What happens a lot of times is people believe that we have more, or we're not really people, or they're not really people. Most of those federal agencies, they believe in our Constitution just as much as we do. Where do I think it goes wrong? I think it goes wrong in Washington, D.C. at the very highest levels, right? And I think sometimes that clouds it. But for what we do as local officers, if it's to protect and serve our community, we do get involved. And you've seen that across the United States. In Australia and those different countries, you see law enforcement is a different type of law enforcement. Here, you can see us challenge the mask mandates or the resolutions. You can't do that in those countries. They have laws that basically make them government agents. Here's where local law enforcement is different. We have control as sheriffs of our local enforcement areas. I have the ability to say, we're not getting involved, or I want to see your documents prior to doing so. And we've done that. I think a lot of sheriffs have stood up and done that. But at the end of the day, if it's a legal process signed by a federal judge as a court order, that is their right to do so. Now, a lot of people want to know, where do we stand? We support the Constitution. That's where we stand. And right now, the federal government on any side, they don't have enough manpower to do much of anything right now. Just like local law enforcement's getting very thin. So I hope I've answered your question the best I can. But just remember, those law enforcement officers still bleed red just like everyone else. And even though there's a difference in opinion on what they can do and should do, they're still good citizens. And a lot of them have said no to a lot of different things also. Thank you.
Okay. Check. Mark. Nothing. Okay. Well, first off, everyone, let's please give our panel a hand. Apparently, Ivy was able to get all her thunder out in her opening 5 minutes because you guys had no questions for her. But she was our pinch hitter. We were glad to have her. Just really quick, you know, we want to clear this room as quickly as possible. We have people who are here to clean up behind you, and we want to make sure that they get home to their families at a decent hour. Dave here wanted everyone to know that he is running for House District 16. There's been redistricting in this state, and so House District 16 has some new borders, and that will allow Dave to run for House District 16. With that being said, I want to thank you all for being here this evening. If you missed anything, or if you have someone who wants to see what happened here, you've already been told where to go to find that at our website as well as our YouTube channel. And so again, thank you. Have a fantastic evening. You don't have to go home, but you do have to leave here. All right.